This is Charlotte Talks. I'm Erik Spanberg, in for Mike Collins. How do you know if you're an old school NBA fan in Charlotte? If you know this song for starters.
We love you, we love you, we represent you, Hornets.
Or if you remember Alonzo Mourning's 17-foot buzzer beater to clinch a playoff series win in 1993 against the Boston Celtics.
103-102 Boston. Charlotte out of timeout. Here's Mourning, the shot. Good! Game over! It's over!
I never get that kind of applause. We're talking basketball today, and we've got three guests who know the history of the Hornets like few others. Muggsy Bogues, the franchise's career leader in steals and assists. Fred Whitfield, team president since 2006. And Rick Bonnell, the NBA beat writer at the Charlotte Observer since James Naismith was a boy. No, that's 1988. Sorry, Rick. Let's start with a little bit of context. I'm going to start with you, Rick. This is the 30th year, obviously, of NBA basketball in Charlotte. The Hornets have had quite an unusual history, even by pro sports standards. So take us back to the days of George Shinn and where this all started.
You know, people just laughed at the idea that Charlotte would ever be a major league city. It would, people made fun. There was some remark by a columnist out in Phoenix before some league meetings about how the only franchise Charlotte would ever get, would have golden arches. There was the whole notion of nobody really knew what Charlotte was. They had a really hard time distinguishing it from Charleston, South Carolina, or Charleston, West Virginia, or whatever. And the irony of that is this was this incredibly vital banking center with a great airport that was just looking for something interesting to do. I mean, when you think about it, other than, Fred, you grew up in this state. I think you'll back me up on this. I mean, there was a time when, pro wrestling was a big deal here.
Yeah, my mom was a big fan.
Right, and two races, NASCAR races, in Concord was also a big deal. But what there was, and I'll let you know that the reason I initially moved down here was to cover ACC basketball after covering it at Syracuse. People loved basketball, and there was a lot of discretionary income and nothing to do with it. And Shinn saw that in combination with the fact that completely independently of the NBA, that Coliseum was going to get built out there as a way to attract ACC tournaments. And George had a vision and was fearless in terms of understanding that, why not? Is there really all that much difference between Charlotte, North Carolina, and Phoenix, Arizona, or Salt Lake City, Utah, or Portland, Oregon? And not only did it accomplish something remarkable, but Fred, I think you'll back me up on this. I don't think there would ever be a Carolina Panthers had there not been an original Charlotte Hornets.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as the NFL looked at expansion, they saw the success of the Hornets, leading the NBA in attendance for 9 straight years, the fandom and the community getting behind the Hornets and the success of that. And I think when Mr. Richardson went in and made his plea to try and get an NFL franchise, I think the NFL understood Charlotte is a great sports town, a great corporate community that would get behind sports, and fans that would love going out and supporting an NFL team the same way they support the Hornets.
Now, Muggsy, you came to the Hornets in the expansion draft, and as most basketball fans know, you became a fan favorite in Charlotte. It's only been mentioned about 1 billion times that you're the shortest player in NBA history. I'm sure everyone knows that by now. 5'3". But what fans really loved about you, of course, was your hustle and your quickness and the way you played the game. Take us inside a little bit. What was it like to be a Charlotte Hornet? Because Rick just alluded to this city went nuts when Major League Sports came here, and you were the first.
Well, I started my career here as a collegiate basketball player at Wake Forest, so I knew a little bit about Charlotte, about the city. We played UNC Charlotte at the Bojangles Coliseum over there for Independence. So we had some big games against Charlotte coming into the city, but it was nothing like this. Getting drafted by the Washington Bullets at the time in 1987, I felt that was going to be my stomping place for quite some time, but unfortunately got introduced to the real NBA when my coach told me that it's a possibility I may be joining an expansion team, which would happen to be in Charlotte, and have no understanding what Charlotte knew about the professional sports. But once we got here, we knew that it was a place where we knew it was going to be very special. The very first night, we lose to Cleveland Cavaliers by 40 points. The ladies in the audience in gowns, the gentlemen in tuxedos. But at the end of the game, they all stood up and gave us a standing ovation. And, knowing that we put our hearts out there and knowing that it was a team just came together and lost by 40, but just to show the appreciation, what we meant to the city. And then not only that, winning 20 games that season, having a 300,000 in Uptown, as you call it, for a parade to celebrate. So you knew you was in a special place.
Fred, they don't cheer if you lose by 40 anymore, do they?
No, they don't.
I guess that changes a little bit. Fred, you've had a very interesting vantage point with this franchise because in the early days, I think you were working for Nike, but you were based in North Carolina. You were a season ticket holder, you've told me many times, so you were a frequent visitor to Tyvola Road. And then in 2006, in part through your long business relationship with Michael Jordan, who was a minority owner at the time, you come back and you take over the Bobcats. We're going to bounce all over here, but tell me a little bit about what you found and inherited when you came here 12 years ago in terms of the state of NBA basketball.
Well, I'll tell you, when I got here 12 years ago, I was sitting in the introductory press conference, and first question I think came from Rick, and he said, "Well, what are you going to do about your TV deal?"
That's exactly true.
I said, I'm going to look into that. I really, honestly, I didn't know that much about, what I was inheriting. It was really surreal that I was even, being given the opportunity by Bob Johnson to come in and run the business side of the organization with Michael coming in and running the basketball side. And so, what I hope to do was dive in and learn as much as I could about what our challenges would be, what things we had to overcome. And I found very quickly that the television deal was going to be our biggest impediment going forward if we didn't do something to get it fixed. And so it was, a city that, had enjoyed the years with the Hornets, loved the NBA because of the Hornets. The Hornets were really a part of the core of this city. And so, to be very honest, the Bobcat brand, for whatever reason, just didn't resonate with the citizens and the fans in Charlotte. And so it was a challenge. The first 5 years, I'd say, were, a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of, nights working with my team, trying to figure out, okay, how can we correct this television deal such that, we can have more than 700,000 people in the Carolinas watch our games for free. How do we get a naming rights partner to put on the building? When I got here, it was Bobcats Arena.
That's right.
And, that clearly was a revenue stream that was not being maximized. How do we get more family shows and concerts into our building so that our operating agreement works in our favor and not to our demise? And so there were a lot of things that we had to work on as an organization to try and move forward. But more importantly, we had to try and put a team on the floor that was a winner. So a lot of challenges, but as we worked through those challenges, I think the thing that gave us the greatest foundation going forward on the business side was getting Fox Sports to invest in our broadcast, to have Time Warner Cable relinquish our rights to their rights to our broadcast, and simultaneously agree to pay to put their name on our building. And I think that was sort of the turn for us on the business side. I think as time started to move on, the community started to, forget about the Hornets being, leaving and being taken away from them, and they, became more and more engaged. And I think, as time moved on, and I'm sure we'll talk about our transition from the Bobcats to the Hornets, things started to turn, and it's very public. Both of you written about us, losing $30 million a year back in those days in 2005, 2006. And we had a deep, deep hole to dig our way out of. But fortunately, this community has supported us and really helped us on the business side be able to move in the right direction. And what we've tried to do is focus on getting what we call on the business side 50-win ready. And that really has nothing to do with, the basketball team as much as it has to do with us on the business side, making sure that when we do have a product on the floor that wins 50 games, we're maximizing every potential revenue opportunity. We fix the things that we can control, the fan experience, making sure it's a family environment that's open and inclusive to everybody in the community. The music touches everybody. Our customer service is at the highest level. Our F&B is where it needs to be. But those are the things we can control, and if we get all those things right and in line and we get a product on the floor that wins 50 games, we'll be sold out every night and maximize it every revenue stream that we possibly can.
F&B, by the way, is food and beverage, so concession stands very important to all of us. That was the voice of Fred Whitfield. He's the Charlotte Hornets president. We also have Rick Bonnell, who has covered the team from its inception, and a guy named Muggsy Bogues. You may be familiar with his work as one of the Charlotte Hornets' early stars. Fred, you were talking a little bit about kind of winning the community back. I wanted to see what each of you think about when you go back to that 364-game sellout streak, I guess the first 9 years or so of the franchise. We heard the clip of Alonzo's playoff shot. Other than that moment, what stands out for each of you in terms of the original Hornets?
Well, for me, it's awesome to see that we was able to regain a franchise back in the city of Charlotte, because people don't understand how difficult it is when a franchise leaves a small market like Charlotte. And when they left in 2002, and when I was part of that campaign to try to lure that team back to Charlotte, and when we was able to get it back in 2004, it lets you know how important and how success it was here during those early days. So as Fred alluded to earlier, it was a centerpiece, a cornerstone of this, this not only Charlotte but the region, and it was beloved. So it really, just grateful to see the name back and to see the support and see everybody really come back into the fold, because it was like the old went out and we weren't able to embrace the old with the new, and I think everything is starting to come back together in the connection. So I'm so pleased with Fred and his team have done, because it has been, he said sleepless nights, but to see where it is today, and here we are celebrating the 30th anniversary, and like I always say, time has wings, and to be here today and to be celebrated in this light is such a treat for me.
Fred, when you think back to when you were a fan, even though you were working in the industry, but when you were going more as a fan, what stands out in terms of the old Hive and what you saw there?
The thing that stands out the most to me were the players. I was, a Nike employee, and I was managing all of our NBA players in the Eastern Conference, but I was based here in Charlotte. And so not only did I go to the games as a season ticket holder, but I was in their locker room every night. And you're talking about a great group of guys that loved not only Charlotte, the game of basketball, but they loved each other. They were all connected at the hip. They all enjoyed going out and doing great things in the community. I think that's what really made this team and this franchise very special. And that's part of the equity that they build out in the community that we're trying to actually take and steal some of that equity to try and move this organization forward in 2018. So when I think back about the fans and how engaged they were, a lot of it had to do with what great guys were on the team and their commitment to this city.
Well, we're going to do what we have to do in a basketball game often. We're going to take a timeout, and then we're going to come back. Rick Bonnell is going to tell us a little bit about his favorite memories. We're talking Hornets history, 30 years with the Charlotte Hornets. You're listening to Charlotte Talks here on WFAE.
Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Corkscrew Wine Shop and Bar, located at The View near BB&T Ballpark in Uptown Charlotte and at Birkdale Village in Lake Norman. Offering wine and beer from all over the world, relax, uncork, unwind. TheScrewCrew.com. And from Blumenthal Performing Arts, presenting Matthew Bourne's Cinderella, a reimagined wartime romance set during the London Blitz, January 7th through 12th at Belk Theater. Tickets at 704-372-1000. On the next Charlotte Talks, areas like South Tryon and Stonewall Street have seen rapid growth of projects from Whole Foods to apartments to a new proposed tower by Duke Energy. Guest host David Borax gets a big picture look at how that part of Uptown is changing and at some of the developments that are underway. That's Charlotte Talks tomorrow at 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
Christmas music has become less of a genre and more of a season unto itself. Radio stations play our festive favorites nonstop, and artists continue to release new holiday albums in hopes of making their days merry and bright. I'm Joshua Johnson. Who's buying holiday music these days, and why? Next time on 1A from WAMU and NPR.
That's coming up at 10 following Charlotte Talks on 90.7 WFAE, Charlotte's NPR news source.
Back on Charlotte Talks, I'm Erik Spanberg in for Mike Collins, and we're talking Charlotte Hornets history. And when we went to the break, we're going through some of the memories beyond Alonzo's infamous shot, or famous shot, I should say, not infamous. And we did not get to you, Rick Bonnell, and you've seen, I think, maybe not every game, but almost every game. So what stands out for you in those early years?
Well, you know, we are coming up on the 30th anniversary of arguably the second most famous game in Hornets history, which is when they beat the Bulls at Christmas. It was, you know, if you remember the whole thing with Kurt Rambis tipping in a missed shot, everything going on. There are so many bizarre little stories. One of my colleagues, Brendan Marks, is doing a big oral history of that day. And one of the most interesting things that I recall from that game is it got so out of control as far as the fascination with the first time that Michael played here that they get a phone call from the governor's office the day of the game. And Carl's life got taken over for about 2 hours on the most important game day to date, finding some way to get the governor into the building. Fred, I'm sure you would like to have that kind of a problem, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a problem.
I understand.
The hysteria over that game was just wild, and my personal favorite story from that day is, you know, like I said, it was the first time that Jordan was playing here. The Observer's front page of the sports section that day was a length of the page artist rendering of Michael dunking. And I walk into shoot around. Now, when I say this, I understand. You know what I'm saying? Is I'm just the messenger. You know what I'm saying? Kelly Trapucco walks up to me with his copy of The Observer and shoves it into my face and says, "Is this the Chicago Observer? What's wrong with you people?" And I just always thought that was funny. And I looked at him and I said, "Kelly, here's the phone number of my editor. You need to deal with someone who actually had made that decision."
You're living in ACC country. What are you going to do? Muggsy, you got a little emotional on Friday that you were honored, obviously, for your contributions to the franchise. Tell us a little bit about what that was like.
I wasn't planning on that to happen, but it just came out. I mean, just a reflection of all the years that I spent in Charlotte, on and off the court, in the community as well. And it's, you know, just showing appreciation. I thank the community. I mean, I thank Fred and the organization for reaching out and, you know, shining me in that light. You know, it meant a lot for me and my family as well. I'm quite sure the community, because we, you know, like I said, when I first came to Charlotte, I thought it was like a match made in heaven for me. You know, the 9 years that I was here, we sold out every game. You know, them 24,000 fans screaming made it so easy to get up night in and night out to go perform. And it just meant a lot to me that night. And, you know, having my family there and sharing it with me, my friends, you know, just really, you know, came full circle for me.
You were talking earlier about how happy you are to see the Hornets brand back, and we are going to talk about that, Fred, about how that came to be. But I'm just wondering, you know, you come here, it's an expansion team. You knew it was big, but did you have any idea that all these years later, this many people would still be so fond of you? I mean, you know, it's not like people forgot you. You have been remembered the whole time and celebrated the whole time.
Well, I maximized my time here. I mean, when we first came, we was young. You know, myself, Del Curry, Rex Chapman, you know, the JRE, we drafted him. So we was young, mixed in with a lot of veteran players. This was the opportunity for us to really kind of, you know, put our stamp on our career. We felt like this was the opportunity for us to really go out and showcase we belong in the league. Felt that a couple teams gave up on us and didn't believe in us, so this was our moment. We took full advantage of, especially Del and myself. We had so much complimentary with one another in terms of the way we played and how we kind of, you know, uplift each other. And we just kind of took full advantage of it. And I think his play and my play kind of, you know, matched what the Hornets needed during that time, and we was fortunate enough to last for 9 years.
Now, there was a fan vote for all-time Hornets team. I think there were 10 players, right?
Yes.
And Muggsy, of course, was one of those. Dale Curry was one of those. Kemba Walker from the current team. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but I just want to sort something out here. So there was the Hornets list, and then Rick Bonnell did his list, which was 3 starting fives. So he had a first team and a second team and a third team. Now, the point guard on the third team was Muggsy Bogues. Are you guys okay? Is this going to be, you guys going to be able to work this out? So, Rick, tell me a little bit about what you did with your team versus the fan vote.
Well, and you know, I thought the way the Hornets did it was the right thing for them. I mean, they were drawing interest. They did not. What I liked about the way that you guys did this is you didn't put any parameters. You just you know vote for the 10 people who you think are most memorable, regardless of how long they played here, what position they played, whatever. I wanted to do something a little different, and what I wanted to do was
you did starting fives, right?
Well, and not only that, but I wanted to specifically build by position.
That's what I meant. Yeah. So go ahead, take us through some of your choices. I was kidding about Muggsy.
I will tell you that the only thing that really surprised me a little bit, and this is maybe a little too inside baseballish, Muggsy, I'm curious if you agree with me on this. I was shocked that Eddie Jones did not make that list. I mean, I thought that Eddie was an absolute. In the time he was here, I mean, I thought he was. You talk these days about quote two-way players. Eddie was so good at both ends of the court that was the only thing that that really, frankly, surprised me. And it's interesting when you mentioned that I had Muggsy's 13 point guard.
It's a pretty good point guard.
There have been some pretty good point guards in the history of Charlotte basketball when you think about it. Kemba and Barron were really quite exceptional. Speaking of Muggsy, everybody talks about the Ellen Bristow quote about there'll be another Larry Bird before there's another Muggsy Bogues. I actually like a different Ellen Bristow quote about you, which is that I loved it when we were talking one day. The word connector is real common in the NBA right now. That is not a term when Muggsy played. And I'll always remember Alan saying, Larry and Zoe believe they feed from Muggsy's palm. And I always thought that was a really cool description of the way that you connected people on those teams.
Appreciate that.
Muggsy, tell us a little bit. Last week you had, speaking of Larry, you had Larry in, I think, for a charity event. It's you, Dell, Larry, and Alonzo are really, I think, what people think of when they think of those early teams. What was it like to have Larry back? I mean, I know you've kept in touch, but what was it like to have him back in Charlotte?
Oh, it's always good to see, Larry and LJ and all the guys when we come in connection with one another. This was the opportunity that we had in terms of what my foundation is doing and what we're trying to do and trying to raise money and bring that type of connection back to Charlotte. And he had a time in his schedule where he was able to come down and take part of it. We was over at the Unknown Brewery. Had a lot of fans that came out and showed a lot of support. It was good just to see him back in Charlotte, to see him, doing the things that he's doing with New York Knicks. But hopefully we have another opportunity to have him back in Charlotte, during his night, the bobblehead night.
He says that you own him in golf, by the way.
Well, as long as he said.
You're good with that?
I'm good with that, yes.
Let's talk a little bit about the current Hornets, Fred. So the team is 14-15, return to the court tomorrow night against Cleveland. Fred will gladly sell you tickets at Hornets.com.
You got it.
So you got Kemba Walker, we mentioned. You have a new coach this year, a new GM. I mean, I know you want to win every night, but what are the expectations realistically you think for this team the rest of the way?
The expectation is to make the playoffs. I got to tell you, I didn't know what to expect when we hired Mitch Kupchak. We did or had an exhaustive search, GM search, and I don't even think Mitch knew how exhaustive it was until after he was hired. But what I'll say is he's been phenomenal to watch work and to work with. I watched his process that he and Buzz Peterson put together to look for the right coach, which was, again, another exhaustive search. And, I really think they got to a place of comfort with Coach Borrego and really, feeling that he could change our style of play, which is something that Mitch and Michael and Buzz all felt we need to do. Nothing obviously wrong with the way Coach Clifford likes to play. He's been very successful. He's a great coach and doing well in Orlando. But we wanted to play more up-tempo, and we felt like our team on the floor, especially, going in and looking in the draft, we needed to make sure that we drafted players that fit that style if we were going to move to that. And Coach Borrego obviously embraced that and brought a lot of history and pedigree from San Antonio, really based around player development and all those type things. So, I like where we are. Would I like to have not lost 8 out of our losses by 4 points or less? Of course, we'd like to have closed out a lot of those close games. But I think our guys are having a lot of fun out there. They seem to be enjoying this style of play. Our fans are certainly giving us a lot of positive feedback about the energy and the excitement of seeing more three-pointers. And, I'm just excited looking at the rest of the season that we'll turn the corner, we'll win a lot of these close games, and we'll continue to fight. And if we can make the playoffs this year, I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. But that is the expectation, and I know Mitch is committed to continue to look at our roster and see if there are things that maybe he can tweak to get us better as we go into the second half of the season. But I like our team. I really like our coach. I like, Mitch's philosophy, and also like the way he's worked very closely with us on the business side. When we talked about training camp, trying to expand our fan base more down in the Triangle some and doing a preseason game in Chapel Hill. Of course, he was in favor of Chapel Hill.
He's an alum, by the way, if people don't know.
But you know what? Next season we're going to do a preseason game out of market in another city, in North Carolina to try and continue to grow our base. And he couldn't have been more receptive to that idea when Pete Gwelly and I went to him and sat down and discussed, our plans and strategy to try and continue to grow our fan base. And so, I'm excited with where we're going. And again, certainly nothing negative against our prior coach. He was great to work with, too. But in this game, things change, and, it was probably time for a change for him and us. And I'm just thrilled that Coach Clifford was able to land right on his feet, and his staff, they all were able to go to Orlando and keep moving forward. But I like where we're headed, and I'm excited about it.
That's the voice of Fred Whitfield. He's the Hornets president. We also have Muggsy Bogues with us, and Rick Bonnell from the Charlotte Observer, who covers the team and has covered the team from the beginning. Rick, what do you think of this year's Hornets team so far?
I think that I find JB, as you mentioned, this is I think this is the 9th coach I've covered. I find JB, and I am I think the word unique is vastly overused in our society. I find his perspective on coaching like nothing I've ever been around before, in the sense that his rotation is very improvisational. He is, he told me at the beginning, I remember when he told me this in the preseason, and I'm thinking, this sounds like something somebody says and doesn't necessarily does, which is that I said to him, how important is it to you to establish a firm rotation? And he said, the players decide that, I don't. And I just find it fascinating that he has 14 players on guaranteed contracts, including, by the way, a second-round point guard, and every single one of them has already played significant, meaningful minutes in multiple games. Muggsy, you would agree with me, right? That's just not the way that most, situations like this are, and I'm just kind of, it's very different. It's out of the box. I appreciate the fact that a 40-year-old rookie coach is going to be his own man. And one day I asked him, I said, what is the basis for all this? And he said, how do you mean this? I said, philosophically. I said, I'm not used to this, and can you explain it to me? And I thought the word he used was very interesting. He said, and I think this is a very Spurs way to look at life. He said, I am not going to be reactionary. He said, I'm going to scout the other team. I'm not oblivious to what they do, but at the end of the day, he said, I do not want to be a coach that is constantly reactionary to what the other guy is doing. And I found that word interesting, and I ran it past Alvin Gentry. They happened to be playing the Pelicans that day. And I said, Alvin, what do you think about all that? And I thought Alvin's reaction was very interesting. He goes, I think it's really cool that he has enough self-confidence to do that. And what he said was, he goes, I endorse that in this regard. He said, because remember, Alvin has coached like 5 different NBA franchises. He said, I want my 5 best players on the court as often as possible, whether that means I have a small team a big team, a fast team, a blocky team. He said, whatever it is, he goes, I want to feel like I gave my 5 best players a chance to win the game. And he says, and if that's at the core of what he's doing, he goes, more power to him.
Now, Muggsy, based on watching you play all those years, I'm going to guess you like that up-tempo style, right?
Oh, absolutely. Especially in today's game, you can't even touch anybody. You know, back in our game, it was a little more physical where you can hand check and kind of guide your man wherever you want him to go. But today is not that way. Just to touch on what Rick said, you would love a coach like JB. I mean, he really is a player's coach. To have that understanding in terms of where players dictate your rotation, that's so true, because you can't go in understanding that, you know, these players are going to be doing this on every given night, because some nights some guys don't have it, and you need those other guys to really, you know, be ready to step in. And having that understanding, knowing your night could come any given night, and knowing that you haven't lost that locker room, you know, guys continue to stay engaged and stay in tune in that way. And that's where a young coach have to keep that voice and have that, you know, insight into his players, because they know they have trust in him, and vice versa, they trust him. So,
Muggsy, I'm curious, and I'm not taking the other side of this. I'm asking a very open-ended question. Do players get squirrely when they don't know know exactly what their role is going to be night to night?
Absolutely. I mean, that's the communication of a coach, having understanding of his players. Because some players, again, you sit down there for months and not even play. But at the same time, you have the understanding that the coach, you got to be ready, and you don't lose that player. That's the connection of a coach, having his pulse on his players.
And he, of course, came up through, you mentioned the Spurs system, Greg Popovich. So, Fred, I'm assuming that played a pretty big role in looking at him and ultimately making the decision to hire him?
Well, you know, it's interesting. You know, 3 of Mitch's candidates that he interviewed in person were assistant coaches with the Spurs. So I think that tells you how much respect not only Mitch, but I think everybody in the league has for Coach Popovich, and, you know, the system he's built, the culture that he's built. You know, it's no secret that when we see successful organizations, we try to emulate them and try to, you know, get that secret sauce. And so I think, again, it speaks volumes that 3 of the Spurs assistant coaches were considered for our head coaching job. And Coach JB seemed to be the absolute right fit that Mitch, Michael, and Buzz felt great about. And, you know, to Rick's point, you know, just watching him and how calm he is during the games, he really doesn't seem to overreact to almost anything, and he seems very confident in what he's doing, and just to have conversations with him about, you know, his vision of what is going to make us a better team is something that I think we all are looking forward to seeing all come to fruition.
Well, we are going to take a little time out. When we come back, we're going to talk about the NBA All-Star Game, which is going to be here in 2 months, just like everyone in Charlotte planned it. Well, it might be a couple years late, but it's going to work out just fine because it's on Michael Jordan's birthday, among other things. Stay with us right here on Charlotte Talks here on WFAE. I'm Erik Spanberg, in for Mike Collins.
Support for Charlotte Talks comes from WFAE members and Charlotte Douglas International Airport, offering business valet parking to all travelers this holiday season and year-round. More at cltairport.com. And from Powers Law Firm PA, family law attorneys dedicated to compassionate solutions for complex marital estates, equitable distribution, and child custody. CharlotteDivorceTeam.com. Coming up on 1A at 10 o'clock, Christmas music has become less of a genre and more of a season unto itself. Radio stations play our festive favorites nonstop, and artists continue to release new holiday albums. Who's buying holiday music these days and why? Host Joshua Johnson looks at that on 1A, coming up next at 10.
It's your world. We help you explore it.
It appears that China has detained 2 Canadians
in possible retaliation for Canada's arrest of a Chinese tech executive.
It's your community. We help you understand it.
Yesterday, some CMS employees were working to clear snow and ice in hopes they could reopen. Andres Pena had been shoveling at Barnett.
Morning Edition on WFAE is an essential way to start your day and stay connected to your world. Listen weekday mornings from 5 to 9 on 90.7 WFAE.
Back on Charlotte Talks, I'm Erik Spanberg in for Mike Collins, and we're talking Hornets history today. We have Muggsy Bogues, Fred Whitfield, the team president, and Rick Bonnell, who is the beat writer for the Charlotte Observer. And I mentioned the All-Star game before we went to the break, but Fred made a very good point, which is this whole 30th anniversary celebration had a very circuitous path. So let's talk about that. I'm just going to give the basics, and then I'm going to let you really explain it, Fred. But so we had the Hornets from 1988 to 2002. They moved to New Orleans in an arena fight. And then in 2003, the NBA awards an expansion franchise to Bob Johnson. 2004, that franchise begins playing, which is the Bobcats. They're at the old Charlotte Coliseum. And in 2005, the Bobcats move uptown. And then things get interesting. So, Fred, how did we get back to being Hornets in purple and teal in Charlotte?
Well, it's interesting, and I got here in, I think, July of 2006, from the time I got here, we were getting fan responses saying, we want to get the Hornets back. We want the Hornets name back. Well, that intellectual property was owned by the New Orleans Hornets. So at that time, it was not possible. But when that franchise was sold to Mr. Benson, and he decided he wanted a name that would be more relevant and connect more with the New Orleans region. The Pelicans seemed to be the right name, with it being the state bird and supposedly protecting the border in New Orleans. And so when the Hornets name became available, we did our due diligence, went out to our fans and said, not only do you want it back, but will you support us more if we invest to bring it back? And Pete Gwelly and our team put together a business case that we made to Michael that said, hey, it's going to cost $5+ million to rebrand and get the name back, but we can acquire the name without having to pay for it because the NBA owns it. And so we'd like to make an application to the league, and we're sure you will make the money back, the investment back, and in multiples. And so he gave us the green light to go forward with it. And so internally, we put a team together, and we looked strategically at every way to try and reacquire the name and do it the right way. Think about how important the history of the franchise was, all the great things that team had done both on and off the floor, and how that would help us be able to continue to move this brand forward. We didn't want to forget the Bobcats years, and so our goal was to go to the NBA, make the application, work closely with the New Orleans franchise, ask them if they would relinquish the records between 1988 2002, so we could marry those records with 2004 on with the Bobcats until the transition. And, of course, they were very gracious in working with us. And so that's really how it all came together. And we almost made a mistake in not listening to the fans and with our colors, because we were thinking very seriously about purple and Carolina blue. And our fans said, no, don't mess this up. Now, you guys are moving down the road the right way, but we want purple and teal back. And so, again, listening to our fans, we made an organizational decision. We were going to go with that. But we spent almost a year working closely with Nike in a weekly session that Pete Gwelly, Seth Bennett, and I sat in with Josh Kramer to really not only come up with what our primary logo would look like, but our entire logo system and identity system, what our court would look like, wanted it to be very unique, what our dance team uniforms would look like, wanted that to be unique. All the touch points on how we would roll this, what our secondary logos would look like that we put on shirts and hats to really make this thing special. And then we wanted to think about special moments, special people. Bobby Fields, who was such a part of this organization, and we all were out there that day on Tavola at the site when he unfortunately lost his life. We wanted to bring his jersey back, hang it in our arena, celebrate his legacy with his family on the court, and then start to think about, wow, when we get to a magical moment like 30 years, how can we then celebrate Muggsy and Dale and Alonzo and Larry and put together a 30th anniversary team that our fans will be a part of and embrace. And that's really how all of that came together. And I have to say, I have an unbelievable team that I work with every day that are so forward-thinking, so creative, so thoughtful. And honestly, when we rolled out that logo, the energy in that building that night, with just the way it was presented, was really magical. And I think our fans really felt like they were part of it and made it happen, which is what it really was all about for us.
So 2014, the team became the Hornets again, and obviously they will be forever, I'm going to tentatively say. I'm assuming
we hope.
There's probably not a name change coming again. When you were going through that process, you mentioned, the fans wanted purple and teal. Obviously, the name was coming back, and you had the Nike design team helping. I'm wondering, how tricky was it to manage threading the needle of honoring the nostalgia, but also updating the logo and the look, so you can kind of have the best of both worlds?
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize the NBA, really takes the old logos and consider them part of our classic, and so it's still part of our organization, but it's sold separately in our fan shop on jackets and shirts and so forth. But they really forced us to create a brand new logo, and we wanted to have a Hornets logo that was more fierce. So we spent a lot of time in what the face of the Hornet would look like, have it be more attacking. The old Hornets logo was more cartoonish, I'd say, but still a lot of fun. And so, the great thing about all of this is we can take the nostalgia, we can take the history, we can take the pinstripes, which was so famous and unique, and add them to our creative and our mix. And we have all those things to play with. And when you got a really great creative team internally, I mean, you just let them go, let them come back with great ideas and work closely with the NBA and now Jordan Brand to create very, very unique uniforms. I think our court is as unique as you'll see across the NBA, and that's something that we wanted to unveil and launch and have our fans be proud of.
So I think all three of you were probably here in 1991. We've mentioned Tyvola Road. That's where the old Charlotte Coliseum was. That's when Charlotte hosted the NBA All-Star Game. At the time, the Eastern Conference featured some guy named Michael Jordan on its roster. Of course, this time the NBA will come back in February, have the All-Star Game here, and Michael Jordan will be in the owner's box. And Del Curry, who was a Hornet at that time, is now thought of by many as the father of the NBA's biggest star, one of the biggest stars, Steph Curry, who I feel pretty confident will be here in February. So let's talk a little bit about All-Star Weekend. Rick, here again, we've gone on an unusual path because 2017 was going to be the NBA All-Star Game.
Never want to hear the term HB.
I was going to say, we usually make people put money in the jar when we use that phrase, but let's use the dreaded phrase for just a moment. How did we get from 17 to 19 and All-Star Game finally coming back to Charlotte?
After the arena controversy...
Which you and I live together as
right.
well.
I really honestly thought I was never having to go to another city council meeting. And I adore Katie Peralta. She's one of my best friends, but we don't really need to be working together that constantly. Fred, the hell that was HB2 that you had to put up with. I really, people need to understand how much time Fred put in behind the scenes in trying to do something about that mess. The All-Star Game is finally going to be here after, as you said, a very weird, and your term circuitous is certainly accurate. I don't think people understand what a big deal this is. And, Fred and I were talking about this the other day. Two things. One, this isn't the Democratic National Convention, but trust me, it's the second biggest thing. The Friday of All-Star Weekend, if you work in a bank tower, you might want to consider taking the day off. Some people from NBA Entertainment who run these events came into our newsroom the other day to have a conference with Katie and I and some other people, and at the end of it, I thought it was valuable. At the end of them giving us all this information, she said, "Is there anything we should know that you might be able to tell us?" And I said, that thing, that blue line thing that runs past the Observer, that train? And she said, yeah. I said, you better get the word out that you don't want anybody trying to drive a car inside the 277 loop, because it is going to be exceptional. And I don't think people understand how many visitors this draws. And to speak to something that Fred said to me the other day, this is important in a vacuum, but it's also important as far as another test drive to Charlotte's ability to host these events.
Absolutely.
And Fred, I want you to pick up on that, but one of the things I'd like you to talk about, if you don't mind, is the sheer scope and size of the All-Star Game in 2019 compared to what it was in 1991. Obviously, light years removed.
It's a whole different deal now. You know, we're expecting $100 to $150 million economic impact for our region over a 4-day period. When you think about just how staggering that is, and really that's part-time jobs, you know, people will be making more
It's
income.
just from jersey sales. No, I'm kidding.
We wish. But seriously, every hotel in this region is sold out. Every restaurant will be packed. The environment is just going to be so festive. And what we sold to the NBA is you can own Charlotte for a week. You're not going to own New York. You're not going to own L.A. You're not going to own Chicago. But you're going to be a big deal in our region. And, you know, to Rick's point, as we go and successfully land each big event, it gives us an opportunity to get the next great event. You know,
You want the NFL draft? Do this very well.
We'd
For
love to get the NFL draft for this community. And, you know, we in this city, the corporate community, the city, the county, and even the state, we work well together as a team to go recruit all of these events. We make them completely bipartisan. We're thrilled we hosted the Democratic National Convention in 2012. We don't think we'd have gotten the All-Star game had we not successfully done that. Had we not successfully done that, we certainly wouldn't have gotten the 2020 Republican National Convention. And so, you know, as we, you know, look to work with David Tepper and Tom Glick and his team, you know, we want to work together with them and support them as they'll support us. And we all support Charlotte. You know, anytime we can put our city on a global stage, let people know what a great airport we have that you can literally fly in from anywhere in the world with only one stop, most places nonstop. You know, it's a very unique environment. And when you come uptown, to Rick's point, most people won't even have to get in their car again. Once they park their car. Couldn't get in their car.
Public service announcement, yes.
But, you know, as we, you know, host that event, 3 weeks later we host the ACC men's basketball tournament. We want to do a great job hosting that so that when they award more years down the road, we certainly want to outbid my hometown of Greensboro and make sure if that tournament's coming to North Carolina, we want to have it. Only way we do that is be successful with this All-Star game.
You know,
we
Fred,
will.
the infrastructure is here. It was built, but it was built to a great degree by the hotel motel tax. You know, there's a public-private partnership between the Hornets and the city to run that arena in the best interest of everybody, and it works right now. It works very well. And so the point here is being aggressive to make, not only to draw these things, but to do them well enough that people want to keep coming back. That is in the local economy's significant interest.
Now, Muggsy, speaking of All-Star games, you, I think, played in the Celebrity All-Star game up in Toronto a couple years ago, right?
Yes, I played in a couple of them. One in Toronto, and unfortunately, I played in one in Atlanta.
And so this is one of the events that'll be here. It has musicians, it has movie stars, and of course, now you qualify on both fronts because you were in Space Jam. And Mike on Facebook had emailed a listener, says, Muggsy, will there ever be a Space Jam 2? Which I think there was, right? Didn't LeBron make a Space Jam?
No.
Oh, there's going to be.
Not
Okay,
yet.
I'm sorry. Okay,
Well,
not
there's
yet.
been
Okay.
talked about.
There's been talked about. Okay, so let me ask the movie star. What do you think's happening with Space Jam 2?
I have no clue.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, it's been talked about, and I really don't know what the concept going to be. I mean, we saved the planet, so I guess we're going first. But,
Once you've saved the planet once, it's kind of boring
yeah, I
to do it
mean,
again.
Plus, you met Bugs Bunny. I mean, that's a pretty good week of work, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's going to be amazing come All-Star Weekend. And you alluded to on Friday, which was the celebrity game. It's going to be take place at the Bojangles Center at 7 o'clock. But not only just that night, on Friday night at Bojangles Center, we're going to have the sophomore and the rookies over at the Spectrum Center at 9 o'clock.
The Rising Stars game,
Rising
right?
Stars is going to be, it's going to be one of the most exciting games because it's going to be a U.S. and a world type of format, how they're going to go about it. So it's going to be very exciting. And not only at that epicenter, they're going to transform that whole epicenter to fan-free destination for all the fans to come out and enjoy. It's going to be amazing.
So
And I've already told
Muggsy's got
Fred,
this thing down.
I was going to say, that's an ambassador right there.
He is.
and I've already told Fred that if Miles Bridges is in the dunk contest, Pete Gwelly really should get fired.
I hope Pete's listening. Good morning,
Rick,
Pete.
I agree with it.
So, Muggsy, what will you be doing All-Star Weekend, or do you know yet?
They're going to have me pretty much all over the city, starting probably that Wednesday. I mean, there's so many activities, so many events that we put on, not on the NBA Care. We're going to visit a lot of schools, so it's going to be a lot of fun festivities take place in the Charlotte. It's a close proximity, so you're really going to be able to enjoy this time around for the All-Star game.
Now, Fred, we have just a couple minutes left, so I'm hoping you can give a little context on All-Star Weekend. Go ahead.
Let me just talk about Muggsy real quick. You know, he's an ambassador for the NBA around the world, not just in Charlotte. He is a young man that the NBA loves showcasing him all over the globe and does a phenomenal job, and we're thrilled to have him back as a part of our organization as an ambassador. But All-Star Weekend is going to be phenomenal. I'd be remiss if I didn't commend our commissioner, Adam Silver, for allowing us the opportunity to host the game after it was pulled in 2017, and also working side by side with a lot of us business leaders, our governor, politicians on both sides of the aisle to help get House Bill 2 repealed, and then allowing us to celebrate this game of basketball in our community in an open and inclusive environment, which it will be. And it'll be the celebration of basketball. And, you know, All-Star Saturday night is going to be a lot of fun with the dunk contest and the three-point contest. The All-Star game on Sunday will be great. But all these other events, for the NBA to be creative enough to go and really take over the epicenter and have that be a free fan destination for all the fans to be able to go out and enjoy the NBA and see players there, to have the open practice and media day at Bojangles Arena, you know, be ticketed, but, you know, very reasonably priced that people can go out and see their superstars. So it's going to be a week-long celebration to let's celebrate the NBA and let's celebrate Charlotte. What a great place we have to live, work, and play.
Should be fun. February 15th through 17th. I hope I have those dates right. That will be the NBA All-Star Game. I want to thank Muggsy Bogues, Fred Whitfield, Rick Bunnell of the Charlotte Observer. We've been talking a little bit about Hornets history. It's the 30th year. Go out and check out the Hornets. They return to the court tomorrow night against Cleveland. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Erik Spanberg, in for Mike Collins on Charlotte Talks.